December 7th, 1961. Aka, northern Japan. In the furnace room of a bank, condemned money waits to burn. This is the Bank of Japan's Akita branch, and the notes on the table are corpses. Worn-out 1,000-yen bills, pulled from circulation, counted one final time before destruction. Then, a clerk's hand stops. One bill in the pile is wrong. The paper is a shade too smooth. Everything else is perfect. The engraving, the ink, the portrait of a 7th century prince, it is a counterfeit, minutes from being burned by the very bank it fooled. The bill survives the furnace, and it ignites one of the largest banknote forgery investigations in post-war Japanese history. Ahead lie a wanted face assembled from 3 different strangers. The day Japan retired its most famous banknote rather than keep fighting one man. And a counterfeit so admired it now sits in a time capsule addressed to the year 6970. This is the story of Chi 37, the phantom of the 1,000-yen note. The note in question was a B-series 1,000-yen bill, the workhorse of Japan's post-war economy. Issued since 1950, it carried the portrait of Prince Shotoku, the ancient statesman whose face had become shorthand for money itself. In the Japan of 1961, a single 1,000-yen bill was serious paper, for many households, a meaningful piece of the monthly budget. The suspect bill traveled to specialists, and the specialists came back shaken. Laid beside a genuine note, the fake could be told apart, barely, by the thickness and feel of the paper. On its own, it was undetectable. The engraved lines held, the colors held. Experts who had spent careers spotting crude fakes were looking at something new, a counterfeit that survived professional scrutiny. It had already survived every till, every wallet, and every bank counter between its printing press and the furnace door. Tokyo's Metropolitan Police kept a ledger of counterfeit cases, and the ledger had its own language. Chi was the code for a forged 1,000-yen note. This was the 37th designated case, so the file was stamped with a bureaucrat's poetry. Chi 37. The man they were hunting had no face, no description, and no name, so the serial number of his crime became his name. For the next 12 years, Japan would know him only as a catalog entry. The fakes did carry a signature, though. Every single bill wore the same serial number, WR789012T. And in that first print run, the numerals drifted. The row of digits sloped gently downward to the right, a small human tremor in an otherwise perfect machine. Detectives clung to that slope. It was the one place where a hand had wavered, the one proof that somewhere behind the paper there was a person. Through the winter, more of them surfaced, in shop tills, in bank counting rooms, always discovered long after the man who passed them had gone. Akita had simply been the first place anyone noticed. The bills themselves had been circulating for weeks, doing what perfect fakes do, working. By spring, the case had a shape, and the shape was alarming. Nothing about it suggested a gang moving crude product in bulk. Everything suggested a single careful hand printing small, spending slow, making no mistakes. The police had seen greedy counterfeiters, desperate counterfeiters, careless counterfeiters. They had never seen a patient one. The counterfeiter had a method, and the method was humility. The bills never appeared in bulk. They appeared one at a time in the smallest places in Japan. The pattern, once police saw it, was almost elegant. A pack of chewing gum for 100 yen, a bag of mandarin oranges for 100 yen, dried shiitake mushrooms for 30 yen. The phantom walked into small shops, bought the cheapest thing on the shelf, and paid with a perfect 1,000-yen bill. 900 yen and change came back, genuine, untraceable, laundered over a wooden counter in 10 seconds. He was not spending fakes. He was buying real money at a discount. Put yourself behind one of those counters in 1962. A quiet man buys 30 yen of dried mushrooms and hands you a crisp 1,000. You count out his change while chatting about the weather, and the most perfect counterfeit in Japanese history settles into your till, indistinguishable from the day's honest earnings. You would never know. Nobody ever did, at least. Never at the moment it mattered. The bills surfaced across an astonishing map from the Tohoku snow country down through Kanto, Chubu, and Kinki, 22 prefectures in all. Plotted on a wall, the finds looked less like a criminal's territory and more like a traveling salesman's route, scattered, unhurried, never lingering. Whoever he was, he moved through the country the way his bills did, quietly and in small denominations. By the end, the recovered total would come to 343 bills. 343,000 yen at face value, spread across 2 years. As criminal enterprises go, it was almost nothing. A modest salary, earned with the finest counterfeiting craftsmanship the country had ever seen. The numbers made no commercial sense. And that, though the police could not fully see it yet, was the most important clue of all. The story could not be contained. Newspapers ran the details police released as warnings. The look of the fakes, the shared serial number, the telltale slope of the digits. Shopkeepers across Japan taped notices beside their registers. And somewhere out there, one particular reader worked through the coverage line by line, treating the national press as a free quality control report. In the spring of 1962, the Phantom shipped a second edition. New bills began surfacing with a new serial number, DF904371C. Detectives put them under the lens and felt the ground shift. The sloping digits, the one human flaw, the flaw the papers had reported, now ran perfectly straight. Fine details of the portrait had been retouched. Every published weakness had been addressed, the way a good manufacturer handles a product recall. The police were no longer studying his mistakes. He was. The upgrade told investigators 2 things, and both were bad. First, the counterfeiter was still active, still printing, still calm enough to revise his plates while the entire country looked for him. Second, he was a professional in the deepest sense, a man for whom public criticism was simply feedback. The original fakes had been nearly impossible to catch. The improved ones were worse. In September 1962, the hunters reached for money. The Metropolitan Police announced rewards: 3,000 yen for every fake turned in, 10,000 for information that led anywhere. The Bankers Association went further and put up 1 million yen. Set that against the crime itself. The bounty on the Phantom's head was worth roughly 3 times the face value of everything he ever printed. It was one of the strangest arithmetic problems in Japanese police history, and it produced nothing. Then, for a moment, the Phantom flickered into view. September 10th, 1962. A shop in Sakura, in Chiba Prefecture, east of Tokyo. A customer passes a fake and is remembered. Mid-30s, small but solidly built, a white hunting cap. March 1963, Shimizu, then Shizuoka. 2 sightings in 2 days. A man around 30, short, round-faced, a black hunting cap, black-rimmed glasses. 3 encounters, 3 descriptions. They agreed on almost nothing. The police did what they could with what they had. Artists blended the accounts into a single composite face, and Japan met its counterfeiter for the first and only time. A wanted image assembled from 3 different strangers, wearing an averaged face that may have belonged to no one. Tips came in. Tips went nowhere. The only portrait of the Phantom was, fittingly, another fake. By 1963, the hunt for one man had become one of the largest police operations in Japanese history. The numbers still stagger. Investigators worked through roughly 150,000 people. Everyone in the national files with a history of forgery, plus the engravers, plate makers, and printers of an entire industry. They traced the owners of some 20,000 printing machines, 1 press at a time. A case squad that reportedly began with 5 detectives grew to around 260. It was, in effect, a census of everyone in Japan who could conceivably make a banknote, and the evidence kept pointing in the same direction. The plates had been cut by someone with a master's eye. The printing showed professional habits, professional patience, professional tools. This was not an amateur who got lucky. Somewhere inside the very trade they were combing, the engravers, the printers, the craftsmen of legitimate paper and ink, investigators believed the Phantom was quietly reading about their progress. The theories stayed inside a narrow, frustrating circle. A master engraver working alone. A plate maker moonlighting after hours. A printing craftsman proving something to himself. As for motive, the sums spoke plainly. By some accounts, he spent more building his private mint than the fakes ever returned, which means the money was probably never the point. Craft was the point. Somebody, somewhere, had wanted to know whether perfection was possible. Every theory described the same silhouette. None of them ever produced a name. Picture the room the detectives spent 12 years imagining. A narrow workshop after closing time, shutters down. A town asleep outside. A small press kept oiled and immaculate. A single lamp, a loop, a sheet of paper held up against the light by careful hands. The room appears in no report because no report ever found it. It exists only as the negative space of the evidence. The workshop Japan traced 20,000 printing machines hoping to find, and never did. And by 1963, the government stopped pretending. The manhunt had consumed 2 years and produced a poster of a man who might not exist. So, the problem was quietly redefined at the highest level. If the state could not remove the phantom from the economy, it would remove the economy from the phantom. Japan decided to kill its own money. What followed was the most expensive compliment ever paid to a Japanese criminal. In 1963, the Ministry of Finance moved to retire the 1,000 yen bill itself. The reasoning, recorded plainly in the history of Japanese currency, cited the wave of sophisticated forgeries, Chi-37 above all. Confidence in the nation's most handled banknote was worth more than any investigation. On November 1st, 1963, a new 1,000 yen note entered circulation carrying a new face. The statesman Ito Hirobomi, Prince Shotoku's 1,000, the Phantom's canvas, was on its way out of Japanese wallets forever. Consider what that meant. Governments redesign money on their own schedules, for their own reasons. This time, one anonymous craftsman had outprinted the Bank of Japan's own defenses, and the state's answer was not an arrest, but a retreat. Every citizen in the country would carry the consequence in their pocket. The new bills amounted to a national admission. We could not catch him, so we changed the locks. Then came the detail people would talk about for decades. The new note debuted on November 1st. On November 4th, 3 days later, a Chag 37 bill surfaced for the last time. After that, nothing. No new fakes, no new sightings. Not one more sheet through the press. The Phantom did not get caught, did not get greedy, did not slip. He watched the country change its money to escape him, and he simply stopped. Counterfeiters are almost always caught the same way. They cannot stop. The craft becomes a compulsion, the spending becomes a habit, and the habit becomes a trail. This one treated stopping as part of the design. From November 1963 onward, only one force in Japan was still working on the case, and it worked for the defense: the clock. The file stayed open. The country moved on. Japan roared into its boom years. Tokyo hosted the Olympics in 1964. The skyline climbed, and the new Ito Hirobumi notes wore soft with honest use. In a quiet corner of the Metropolitan Police, the Che-37 squad kept grinding through its mountain. 150,000 names to be cleared, one interview at a time. Years passed between developments. Then years passed without any. In 1970, Osaka hosted the World Expo, and Japan buried a message to the far future. A time capsule sunk 15 meters beneath Osaka Castle Park, packed with more than 2,000 objects chosen to explain this civilization to the next one. Among the seeds, the tools, and the everyday treasures, the Osaka police contributed one item: a Chi-37 counterfeit. The deepest capsule is addressed to the year 6970. 5,000 years from now, strangers will open it and find his work, filed in effect under art. The law, meanwhile, kept its own calendar. 10 years after the last bill surfaced in the first days of November 1973, the statute of limitations quietly completed. No arrest would ever be possible. The greatest counterfeiter in Japanese history stepped out of legal existence the same way he had lived, without a sound. The files record the moment with bureaucratic calm. The case was closed, unsolved, and the man behind 343 perfect bills owed Japan nothing at all. He was never identified. No confession ever surfaced. No credible name was ever attached to the file. The man in the white hunting cap, the man in the black one, the round-faced customer counting his change, one of them, or none of them, was him. Whoever he was, he lived out his days somewhere in the country he had beaten, spending honest money among people who never knew. Japanese criminal history keeps a short shelf of perfect ghosts, the ones who did the impossible and dissolved. Most left behind chaos, or grief, or at least a victim. This one left behind craftsmanship. Nobody was hurt. The only things he ever took were pocket change and certainty. His entire legacy is a stack of beautiful paper in evidence storage, a retired banknote, and a row of printed digits that leaned ever so slightly to the right, the only confession he ever made. And even that one, he corrected. Somewhere beneath Osaka, his masterpiece waits in the dark, sealed beside the proudest artifacts of its century. The capsule is scheduled to open in the year 6970. Someone will lift out a small piece of paper that promises 1,000 yen and was never worth anything except as proof of how close a human hand once came to perfect. The phantom of the 1,000 yen note was never named and never caught. He remains exactly what he printed, too good to tell from the real thing.